The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to Training Camp Confidential, the Washington Commanders. Day number 1 of training camp in the books. We're off and we're running and it feels good. Feels good. Number of things to get to today as the Commanders took care of their first order of business, getting to camp healthy. And it was something that I was looking forward to seeing, because as you watch other teams around the league get to camp and you start hearing the list of players who are going to start on the PUP list or NFI list, you know, I know a lot of you are still following Chase Young and players that used to be here. Chase Young starting on the PUP list for the New Orleans Saints with the neck injury. He had surgery this offseason, still hasn't fully recovered. So you're kind of just waiting to see what the damage would be. We've been relatively healthy all offseason. There were a couple of guys that were held out of some of the OTAs, precautionary things, nothing major. Johnny Newton was the biggest name, and we got some really, really good news today that I don't think anybody expected. I literally sat here last night, less than 6 hours ago. No, 6 is a little bit extreme. Maybe 12 hours ago, roughly. I sat here talking about, oh, well, maybe mid-August is the timeline. Like maybe that's where he probably, and if he's mid to early, I said, and he said, you know, sooner rather than later. And Adam Peters has not lied to us yet, right? He has not lied to us one single time. That man looked us in our eyes and told us that he was confident in the left tackle position. Again, I don't know if it's going to come to fruition and if it's going to be successful this year or not. But he said, I feel good about Trent Scott. I feel good about Cornelius Lucas. I feel good about what we have at left tackle. And I said, hey, AP, stop playing with me, man. And he's like, who's playing? I said, hey, man, you serious about that? Nah, man, stop, man. What you doing at left tackle? He's like, I told you, I think we straight over there. No, for real. I mean, you're not going to fix right tackle neither? You cool with Andrew Wiley? I said we good at tackle. You serious? Yeah, I am. So he told us he was serious then. He was. I mean, he did draft Brandon Coleman, but I don't think he's going to start initially. And he told us sooner rather than later. I don't think he thought it would be this soon, though. We'll get to the press conferences of Jonathan Allen, Terry McLaurin, and of course, head coach Dan Quinn. But before we do that, let's start with practice today. Practice? There was actually practice today. But keep in mind, you're ramping them up. They're starting slow. There are no pads. This felt like more of a continuation of the mini camp that they finished in June with, right? Before they went on their little break. So this felt more like OTA / mini camp type work. It didn't feel much different. But head coach Dan Quinn told us yesterday, and we talked about this on the program yesterday, that there was going to be an emphasis put on red zone to start camp. Something he's doing different this year. He understands the importance of red zone. If you're a fan of this team and you've seen some of the struggles we've had in the red zone, you too know the importance of red zone efficiency, something that has eluded this team since 2020 when we were actually really good in the red zone. Scott Turner's first season, we were really good in the red zone that year. Unfortunately, we just didn't get there enough. But when we did get there, we cashed in. That was Antonio Gibson, 11 rushing touchdowns, another 3 or 4 through the air as a receiver. That was Peyton Barber bruising his way into the end zone. So we were very efficient in 2020. Every year since then, we've been absolutely horrid in the red zone. I think it culminated, I think, the apex of the futility in the red zone was the week 5 2022 contest versus the Tennessee Titans, in which we got to the 2-yard line and couldn't get in, and through a game gut-wrenching, losing, gut-punching interception on 3rd down when we still had a down left to lose that football game. So anyway, he talked about wanting to get a lot of red zone work in, and that's exactly what they did today. Jayden Daniels was, by all accounts, razor sharp. He was red hot to start, kind of picked up where he left off over the spring, came out, first possession that he was in, and the only possession of practice, the very first one, that was an 11-on-11, he did not start. That was the only portion of practice where he was not with the ones. Marcus Mariota took the first set of reps with the ones. From that point on in practice, it was all Jayden Daniels with the ones throughout, and he was outstanding. He had one incompletion to start practice. It was a nice pass breakup by Tyler Owens. Again, if you're looking for guys to try to make this team as undrafted players, you're going to need to make some plays that stand out on tape. So when they go back and they're looking at, the footage from practice, they say, hey, who's that guy? And they go, hey, that's the undrafted kid, Tyler Owens from Texas Tech. Oh, okay. He flashed, right? That's what you want to do. He made a play early on. Outside of that, it was lights out, baby, from JD5, as he was just throwing darts all over the field. Went 3 of 4 after the one incompletion, 3 straight completions, including a touchdown pass to Zach Ertz. He also had touchdown passes. Again, we're talking red zone work, so everything close proximity. He also had touchdown passes to John Bates and to Kazmeir Allen, who made a diving catch. We talked about Kazmeir Allen. Don't know if he's going to make this team, but if he's going to give himself a shot, he's going to have to catch the football, something that he did not do well last season. We know he can return kicks. We don't know he can return punts. He struggled at that last year. Hopefully he's better at that this year, because again, if he's going to make this team, and we don't know how many receivers they're going to keep, and we don't know who's going to factor into that decision-making process, but we've talked about a number of guys. Obviously, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, De'Ami Brown, but Jamison Crowder's still here. They didn't bring in, a lot of these guys for no reason, right? They brought in guys like Olamide Zaccheaus for a reason. Now, whether he makes the team or not, don't know, but they're going to bring these guys in here to push whomever is at the back end of that roster. Guy like Kaz Allen is in that mix. Got to catch the football. He did that today. Diving catch for a touchdown. All right. And he's going to have to show that he can return punts and kickoffs, because he's going to have to show he can do multiple things. Because I also don't think he's going to be a key contributor on special teams, which I think is also going to make or break you making the roster. So it's going to be tough if you can't go down and make a tackle on special teams. And I don't see Kaz Allen doing that at this current juncture. So with that said, though, good to see him making an opportunity, taking advantage of an opportunity and making his presence felt by making a diving stab for a touchdown. So Jayden Daniels had also his highlight throw of the day was to running back Brian Robinson Jr. in the back corner of the end zone. Brian Robinson Jr. able to get his feet down. I think this staff, and I've talked about this all offseason, they're going to find out that this kid can catch the football. Like, they brought in Eckler, and, my guy Derek B continues to remind me that Brian Robinson Jr., not the best in pass protection right now. True. And so don't want to overlook the fact that they brought in Eckler not only as a change of pace and a guy that can catch it out of the backfield and do some of those other things. Also, he's a much better pass protector than Brian Robinson Jr. is at this point of his career. So those are all things that you don't want to overlook. But I think the main reason they brought Eckler in here was because they didn't think Brian Robinson Jr. could catch. And I talked about that when they first signed Eckler, like, yo, y'all treating Brian Robinson Jr. like he's a first and second down back, like he can't catch on third down. Now, again, you got to be able to protect on third down, maybe more so than being able to catch the football. But he's more versatile, and we saw that. That was on full display last year. He's more versatile than people give him credit for. I think they're finding that out. Nice catch today, back corner of the end zone. Excellent throw by Jayden Daniels. Perfectly placed by all who were in attendance. And so he's off to a great start. Is Jayden Daniels, which is what you want. There, again, keep in mind, it's going to be some rough days. There's going to be days like today where he's razor sharp. Everybody's lauding and praising him, talking about how good he looked, this, that, and the third. So understand that it's going to be a mixed bag. This is a rookie that we're talking about here. New offense. A lot of things going to be thrown at him. Sometimes it'll be the first time he's seen it in his career, right? So love that he got off to a fast start, though, with the red zone. And hopefully this is an area that Washington can be much more efficient in than in years past. Again, if we want the scoring totals to go up, part of that has to come from being efficient when it matters most. When you get that ball inside the 10, the 5-yard line, being able to punch it in, when you get that ball inside the 20 to the 17 to the 13, you got to be able to get it in the end zone. You don't want to be settling for a bunch of 37 and 35 and 33-yard field goals. You want to be putting the ball in the end zone. So these red zone periods are going to be huge. You want to see them be able to execute in those situations at a high clip. So they got off to a good start today with their red zone work. Keep in mind, pads are not on yet, and that's when I'm going to really start to take notice of what it is Jayden Daniels is doing. Even though he can't be touched, it's a little bit different when there's pads on for both the offensive and defensive lines. They're getting after one another, and now there's a little bit more popping going on, a little bit more carnage around him. Now let's see how he operates in maybe a muddy pocket. Maybe he has to escape the pocket, extend, make something happen. Because that was something that we talked about he didn't do a lot of at LSU, right? Extend the play to throw. He extended as a runner. He didn't extend to be a thrower quite often in college. So we'll see if that's something that he becomes more adept at this level. But great start for him in day number 1 of camp. So let's get to some of the press conferences from today. And there was actually a couple of gems dropped on our melon. Some you got to read in between the lines, draw inferences, but that's what I like to do here. And others, pretty direct, right? Straightforward, in your face. And so we'll talk about all of those things. So we'll start with Jon Allen. He had a quick little 4.5-minute presser or so today. He talked about things he's doing different this year. So he's changed his diet, hired a chef. He's taking care of his body a little bit more. He looks to be in fantastic shape, by the way. Cut his hair, but we already knew that, right? And he's in tremendous shape. I don't know if I've seen him in this good a shape. Not to say that he's come in here out of shape in previous years, but he looks to be in tremendous shape. You can tell that he's taking it serious. He's starting to get to that point of his career where he realizes, if I want to add some more years on the back end of my career, I got to start taking care of my body better now. And he dealt with some injuries last year too. So I think that might have also prompted him to say, you know what? I got to be healthier to perform at the level that I know I'm capable of. I got to stay healthy, and I got to start doing some things differently. And he talked about some of those things. talked about the camaraderie. So one of the things we learned yesterday, I didn't talk about it, probably should have talked about it yesterday, was that the players aren't staying at home like they did under Rivera in terms of camp, and just, coming to the facility and showing up for work. They're staying in a team hotel. So it's simulating going to a remote location for camp, i.e. when they used to be in Richmond. It's simulating that by having them stay in the hotel away from their family, kind of having that bond be established, but it's not pulling them, that far away from their family where they can't see them or they're not that close to them. So I think it's a good look. And, this continues the theme of brotherhood, camaraderie, learning about the guy next to you and understanding what his why is, fostering relationships outside of football. This is the continuation of what we heard Terry McLaurin talk about earlier this season, when he said we came the first couple days of OTAs and we didn't do anything football related. We just got to know our teammates, right? This is a continuation of what we heard Dan Quinn talk about all offseason, the brotherhood. This is a continuation of Tress Way talking about, yeah, man, it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours after practice, and we're still in the facility kicking it, playing ping pong and, cornhole and things of that nature, just hanging out with one another because we enjoy each other's company, right? So this is a continuation of that as well. For the young guys who are trying to make this football team, they could get some studying in, diving into the playbook, challenging one another. Yeah, that's awesome. But for a lot of the veterans, this is more about, man, I'm just kicking it with my teammates, getting to know them and building that bond, right? So he talked about the camaraderie of staying at the hotel. Again, another little subtle wrinkle that you don't really think about, especially as fans, because we're not affected by that. But it does impact, the product on the field, He talked about how the defense complements him, or he was asked about how this defense and Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. and the things they like to do can complement his skill set. And Jonathan Allen pivoted and said, it ain't just about me. It's about complementing everybody's skill sets. And in him saying what he said it's me playing off of Clee and Clee playing off of Duran and so forth and so forth. It got me to thinking about the defense, in particular the defensive line. And I think we've already acknowledged this. I think we've talked about this already. At least I feel like I've already said this before, and we've had this discussion once before. But just to make it abundantly clear, the starting defensive line is as follows. And if you're listening to Jon Allen talk about this, he's giving you a hint. He mentioned Clelin Ferrell. Again, that was a unprompted mention of Clelin Ferrell's name. Nobody asked him anything about Clelin Ferrell. That's the third time this offseason I've heard Jonathan Allen mention Clelin Ferrell's name. So he's playing alongside him, is what I'm telling you. So I think a lot of you had already jumped to that conclusion. So did I, that Clelin Ferrell was one of the starters along the defensive line. But just in case you're not sure, this is what I think it looks like based off of what I've heard from Jonathan Allen multiple times. So we already knew Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen were all starters. And we just didn't know who was the other starting defensive end. I think we all assumed it's Clelin Ferrell. It is. Okay. It's Clelin Ferrell. So now, again, I think there'll be a bunch of different sub packages, and you get into obvious passing situations, and Dante Fowler Jr. will be getting some of those reps. Will they move some of the pieces around? Will where you see Jamin Davis actually come in and put his hand in the dirt, or where they just bring him in to stand up and rush him. There are different ways to see how they're going to utilize some of these guys, but all in all, first and second down in a lot of those instances, you're going to see Cleveland Farrell on the field. But don't forget about Johnny Newton. And another thing that Jonathan Allen talked about was leadership, or he was asked about leadership. And he was seen today consistently going over to Johnny Newton after reps and talking to him, giving him little pointers and, talking to him about hand usage and hand placement and, steps, right? Initial steps off the ball, no wasted motion, that sort of thing. And he said, I just want to be for him what Ziggy Hood was for me. And again, it's funny because we don't think about those veterans that we, in our minds, play insignificant roles because it's Ziggy Hood. We got Ziggy Hood here in Washington on the back end of his career. His best years were behind him. He had played with the Steelers for years, played well for them. By the time he got to Washington, he was not the player that he once was. So, you view that guy as just a wily old veteran that's here, taking up a roster spot, not understanding the value that veteran has for a guy like Jonathan Allen, a rookie coming into the league, just trying to figure out where he fits in, right? So it's fun to hear guys, talk about that part of the game and the leadership and the roles that they're starting to assume, right? So Jonathan Allen becoming one of those, leaders, and he's been a leader here, but excuse me, I think he's becoming even a more vocal leader and a guy that's now starting to mentor some of the young players, right? So then you get to Terry McLaurin. He talked about his timing with Jayden Daniels. And he said it's something that he hasn't been able to build with other quarterbacks in the past. And he hasn't had that time on task with a lot of quarterbacks because it's been a revolving door, right? The one guy in his career, you could argue that he had some semblance of a rapport with was Taylor Heineke, right? That's when he did probably some of his best work, was with Heineke. But even that was disjointed because Heineke was never really supposed to be the guy. So every time he would get comfortable with Heineke, he'd get yanked out of there, right? They'd go find, because there was always a shinier toy than Taylor Heineke. Whether it was Ryan Fitzpatrick, Heineke has to come back in, he gets hurt. Or it's Carson Wentz, he gets hurt, Heineke has to come back in because Wentz gets hurt. There was always some kind of shinier toy out there because Heineke was never supposed to be the guy. But he's never really been able to build that rapport. Sam Howell last year, one and done, right? So he's like, I think this is going to be my first opportunity to really build that timing, that chemistry, where, we remember last year, Terry was on the Pivot podcast and he was like, I want to be able to line up at the line of scrimmage, see the coverage, look at the quarterback, have a signal, and we know, all right, I'm getting one-on-one. There's no safety help. Safety's cheating on the other side of the field, or he's trying to disguise. He ain't going to be able to get back on top before I beat this corner. I'm getting outside and I'm taking him uptown, and we going up top. Initially I was running a hitch. Now I'm running a go because we see the coverage and I know I can beat this dude. I'm going to take my shot. So I think he's excited about that opportunity that's being presented to him. So he's happy about some of the timing things. They've got some work to do, obviously. And he talked about them, establishing some some timing in the red zone. And obviously today was red zone. So some of the conversation, revolved around red zone timing and, ball placement in the red zone, that sort of thing. He talked about the difference this year. And I had asked, excuse me, Logan Paulson about what he felt like the difference was. He'd been around the last 4 administrations here, 4. Yeah, I said that right. Going all the way back to the Shanahans. He was here for the Shanahans. He was here for Gruden. He was here for Rivera. The first 2 as a player. Rivera, he was here in a media capacity. And now seeing the change over to Dan Quinn and company, Adam Peters and so forth and so forth. I asked him what the difference was, and he's talked about responsibilities, bringing in, good people, and everybody having a defined role, right? And I've been talking about that all off season, about the little, detailed roles that everyone has, like offensive pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator. These are things that we didn't have in the past, right? So Terry talked about good people being brought in who are good at their jobs and the consistency at which they're able to operate. And so he said the biggest difference is being able to see, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and the offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, and the defensive coordinator, Joe Witt Jr., and all these different positional coaches, everybody being brought in here and being on the same page, being good people. And he goes back to establishing relationships. And he's like, Terry's big on relationships, obviously. And we've heard him talk about that in the past. And he talked about being able to trust that everyone's going to do what they say they're going to do. And that includes the staff, and it starts at the top and it works its way down to the players. So he talked about leadership. And, I talked about this a while back, but I only glossed over it. I didn't really focus in on it. But I remember talking about this briefly, how excited I think some of the veteran leaders on the team previous, so Jonathan Allen and Terry McLaurin in particular, those were really the only 2 real leaders, along with Tressway to a degree. Jeremy Reeves is a leader, he, captain and all that. But again, there's levels to this shit. So I talked about how excited you could tell Terry and Jonathan Allen in particular were with having veteran leaders on the team, so that their roles as leaders could be diminished just a bit. It's exhausting. It's draining having to always be the guy that has to answer to everything when things don't go well. Anything goes awry defensively, we're going to Jonathan Allen, and we need a soundbite from him, right? Now you can go to Bobby Wagner too. That's refreshing for Jonathan Allen. You can tell, listening to him talk, he was talking about having Wagner behind him this year and how it's a privilege to play in front of him, and he can't wait to be able to do that. But from a leadership standpoint, what he's meant and what he's brought to the table already, right? Same thing with guys like Zach Ertz. You can tell Terry's like, this is a breath of fresh air to have other guys take some of the responsibility off of our plate. Look, I don't mind being a leader. And Terry said, I don't mind being a leader, but it's good to have other leaders here. So you see it start to really take shape when you hear Terry. And this was news to me. I had not heard anything about this team pledge. So this is the first time I heard anything about this. So apparently Dan Quinn, and he's a master of camaraderie and brotherhood. He's the master at building a culture. Anybody who's played for him will tell you this is his superpower, right? That in defense. He has taken the power in terms of the ownership of roster, and he's given it to the players. And he's given it to the leaders, right? And he said, hey, you guys take this. You guys be the leaders. And so it's Terry, it's Jon, it's Zach Ertz, it's Bobby Wagner, it's Austin Eckler, it's all those veteran players. And he's saying, hey, you guys go lead the squad. And so what they've ultimately done is they had a pledge. Every player wrote down what they felt like they could do mentally, physically, to help contribute to team building, chemistry, and most importantly, winning. How can you be the best teammate that you can possibly be? How can you do everything in your power, physically, mentally, emotionally, to be available for your team? And how can you be accountable not only for yourself, but the man next to you? They put together this pledge, and Terry didn't want to get too in depth as to what was said in terms of the pledge, but he gave us a sort of a skeleton, an outline, if you will, about what was in it. And there was a lot of accountability. He says, you know what? Writing something down forces you to be accountable, because we can go back and say, you wrote that and you signed your name on that. So it's one thing if you say something, 2 months later, if we come back, you can deny that you said that. Now it's my word against yours. We got this shit in writing. You wrote this down and then you signed your name on the dotted line. You got to take ownership of this. I think that's brilliant on the part of Dan Quinn. Brilliant to give these players that autonomy to conduct this amongst themselves, because in order to have them police themselves, there has to be accountability. And it can't just be to the coaches or the staff or, the front office. It has to be to each other. So he talked about that team pledge, and I thought that was pretty damn good stuff. So it's off to a good start. I can tell you that much. And then we heard from head coach Dan Quinn. And we talked yesterday, and I said, we're going to hear from him again today. And we did. And we're probably going to hear from him again tomorrow, because you're going to hear from the coach quite a bit. And eventually, we'll get to hear from the coordinators. Can't wait to hear from Joe Witt Jr. again. But his opening statement was a profound one, because he threw us a hell of a curveball. I mean, I was sitting dead red fastball. Okay, going to come out here, tell us that Johnny Newton was officially placed on NFI. And then if there's any other news regarding injuries, we're going to get that information, which we did. F.A. Obata was placed on the PUP list. What we didn't see happening, though, was him coming out and saying that Johnny Newton was going to practice today and he was activated off of the NFI list. Wait, what? You just told us yesterday he was going to be placed on the NFI list. And now you said, he was making great progress and he would be back, sooner rather than later, which is what Adam Peters told us. But there was no timetable set. And they felt really good about his progress. And Peters called him a monster, and he's been getting after it. Clearly he has. Because I remember telling you guys a while back, August, sometime in early to mid-August, right? And I reinforced that. I doubled down on that last night.
here we are the very next day, and this guy's out there in practice. Now they're going to take it slow with him, as they should. And I thought DQ said it perfectly. These, first few practices for him are going to be the offseason. He's, he missed all of that. But the good thing is they're doing a lot of those things that they did in the OTAs. There is no practice or padded practices right now. So this is a good ramp up period for him. They're going to keep him out of those 11-on-11 sessions and things of that nature, 7-on-7s. He'll be doing a lot of the individual work to start. And then as he ramps up, in activity, they'll start to integrate him into the 7-on-7s, into the 11-on-11s, in the team drills. And then, get him into those padded practices. I wonder if by the time the pads go on, if he'll be ready to throw them on as well. I would assume so, right? I think DQ also said that there's now this really, because he's ahead of schedule, as DQ said, I wasn't expecting him until a little bit later on. Now we have a runway to ramp him up and get him ready so that he doesn't really miss anything. So I think even though he won't participate in team drills to start, by the time they get to padded practices, he'll be ready to jump right in. That's my guess. I can't be certain of that, but it's just good to see 95 out there. Because we didn't know how long it was going to take him to get out there. We were debating on whether he'd play, or I was debating on whether he'd play in the preseason or not. He's definitely, if everything goes according to plan and he stays healthy, you got to assume that he's gonna play and play a good amount of snaps in the preseason, which is music to all of our ears. So love it. He talked about red zone importance, and obviously practice today surrounded red zone. I talked about red zone earlier and the importance of the red zone, so I don't really need to hammer that home that much more. But he's like, it comes at you fast. You got to be prepared, and they want to put a lot of emphasis on red zone work. He talked about one of the things at the top of the pile has to be speed. And we talked about this last night because DQ referenced speed and execution last night. I'm going to give you the direct quote from last night. He says, while playing really fast, we need excellent execution. Execution and speed over and over again is what he said, right? And then I talked about Dorrance Armstrong talking about how tough it is to play defense for DQ and that the speed is the biggest key, and not everybody is built to play at the rate of speed that DQ demands you play defense for him. And I told you, one of the reasons why I was jealous of the Cowboys defensively and I admired what they did defensively is because of Dan Quinn. And I used to always tell you guys, they're flying around out there. They're playing at a different level of speed than any other defense in the league. And that is a DQ hallmark. It is the calling card of his defense, if you will. Their ability to fly around with reckless abandon, and still play with a controlled chaos, right? So he talked about at the top of the pile needs to be speed. You have to play with speed for him, right? He doesn't know any other speed. The lever's all the way up to 10 on the speed meter, and then it's broke. Like he breaks it off. It's at 10. You got to play at 10 for him at all times. He's like, if I don't see the speed, then he says, I asked the question, does he not know or can he not go? Can we just establish that that's a bar? Does he not know or can he not go? So speed is of paramount importance to Dan Quinn, which I love because all they've talked about all off season, speed, physicality, arriving violently. These are going to be hallmarks of what make a commander, right? He's talked about establishing an identity. Speed is a part of that identity. Physicality is a part of that identity. Arriving violently, taking it away.
These are all going to be a part of the identity that he's trying to establish here on the defensive side of football. But just playing fast in general, both sides of the football, all phases, special teams included, it's going to be key for him. He talked about Zach Ertz, and he said, I expected him to come in here and be a leader, but he's exceeded my expectations from a leadership standpoint. He said, but I didn't ask him to come in here and be a coach. He's not a coach. Excuse me. This guy knows how to get open. He knows how to sit down in zone. He knows how to beat zone. He knows how to get open against man. He just knows the little subtleties of the game. And, his ability to come in here and be a professional, but also a leader, has blown him away. He's been really impressed with Zach Ertz. So, again, another one of those guys as a veteran that's coming in here and taking some of that veteran leadership pressure off of Terry, off of Jon, and allowing and again, that whole Rivera era, we didn't really have a lot of quality veterans because Rivera wanted to steer clear of veterans because of how old his teams got in Carolina. So he made it a point of emphasis to stay relatively young, and I think it hurt us that we didn't have some of that veteran presence. Also, you weren't going to get good veterans, quality veterans, to come to Washington when Rivera was here because their staff just wasn't respected in that way. So it's a little bit different, too. You weren't going to get a Bobby Wagner or a Zach Ertz to come and play for Ron Rivera. So that was also something that you had to keep in mind as well. But he really loves what he's getting from Zach Ertz already. This was, I thought, the most impactful thing that Dan Quinn said today. He was asked about generating pass rush, something that Washington failed to do very well last season, especially after the trades for Montez Sweat and or with Montez Sweat and Chase Young were made. And he said, getting after the quarterback is the most important thing, is at the top of the pile after taking it away and tackling. So he gave us the order in which these things are important. The very first thing at the top of the pile, the very top of the list defensively for Dan Quinn, if we're ranking these things in order of importance, is taking the ball away. Nothing trumps that. We've got all the qualities and things that you do to take it away: playing fast, playing physical, playing with the right mentality, which means executing, right? But when we talk about the process, taking the ball away is one, according to Dan Quinn. Tackling is two, right? And then third most important thing is getting after the quarterback. Excuse me. So he gave us what needs to be done, right? That's pretty interesting stuff. Decision-making process in the red zone. I thought this was an interesting conversation here. He talked about the difference between being aggressive versus being risk adverse. So he said, this is the time of the year where you want to try things and figure out what you can and can't get away with. I remember Chris Cooley used to talk about how players were graded. He said, you got a grade, you got two different grades. One grade was, did you get the job done? Right? This grade had nothing to do with technique. With did you do it correctly? Was it the right decision? Any of that. Did you get your job done? And then the other grade was, technically, did you do it correctly? Did you go through the right process? Did you do it the way we taught you to do it? So in the red zone, he was talking about process. And he was talking about decision-making process and how you may end up throwing a touchdown pass on a tight window throw. But, upon looking at this on film, was that the right decision? Did you do the right thing there? That was pretty risky. You had a wide open receiver out in the flats, out of the backfield. Got the running back there. Just hit him. Don't try to force it in there to the tight end. That ball gets bad in the air, get picked off. You just dump it down to the back out of the backfield. He walks in the end zone, right? So you still did score a touchdown, but we want you to understand that's risky behavior. But at the same time, you want to be able to have your quarterback feel confident enough in their abilities to make that type of throw. This is the time to find out if they can or can't, right? He said what we don't want is to have the quarterback be so risk adverse that you're not taking chances, i.e., you don't want him to be Alex Smith. You also don't want him to be Taylor Heineke. Heineke was very aggressive in the red zone. Hence, he would throw picks in the red zone. He would turn it over in the red zone. There would be games we would get to the red zone 3 or 4 times. And I remember that Packers game. We got to the red zone like 4 times against the Packers back in 2022. Or was it 2021? I think it was 2021. We got to the red zone like 4 times. We didn't score any points. Heineke fumbled. That was a dumb rule. They said he gave himself up when he scored. Then he fumbled on the next play. He threw a pick in the back of the end zone, trying to force it to Terry. I think Antonio Gibson had a fumble. And then we had Chris Blewett, and he had a kick blocked. We got no points. we had a red zone 4 times in that game and walked away with 0 points. And ended up losing to the Packers like 24-10 in a game that I felt like we dominated and still didn't win. It was definitely 21 because we beat them in 2022, the following year. So you don't want to be Heineke and super aggressive in the red zone that you're making mistakes. You don't want to be, Alex Smith and so risk adverse that you're not taking any chances. Got to be somewhere in the middle. And so finding that fine line. He talked about that. And then lastly, or actually a couple more things, patience or lack thereof and having a sense of urgency. This was more of a message to the fan base. But because the question was phrased about the fan base and, fans that want to win now. And, Dan Quinn having to try to balance between having patience and having a sense of urgency to kind of match the fan base and their sense of urgency. And he was like, he said, I struggle with patience. He said, that's why when people wanted to talk about a rebuild, I stayed away from that. And I talked about recalibration because this isn't real estate. We didn't walk into a fixer upper and come in here and are trying to, clean something up. This isn't a rebuild. We're trying to do this with a sense of urgency and as quick as possible. And when he said that, I was like, huh. I said, but Dan, you kind of did walk into a fixer upper, though. I mean, we won 4 games last year. So this is sort of kind of a fixer upper, like you guys had to come in here and literally clean house top to bottom and do a lot of renovating. You can call it whatever you want. Again, I've made fun of recalibration and finding the north off season long, and I've done that tongue in cheek. I get what he's saying, and I understand that's a scary word for a lot of people, rebuilding. because that suggests that you have no shot at winning in the upcoming season. So you try to steer clear of, words with negative connotation that suggest that we don't have a shot. Nobody ever wants to admit that. So I get it. But I love him talking about the sense of urgency. He's like, we have a sense of urgency in everything that we do. Even down to the way that they play. Him talking about playing fast, having that sense of urgency. That's key, right? So you can understand that they're not looking to come in here and just, hey, let's just win 5 or 6 games this year. Like, that's the expectation from many rational fans. It's just come in here and win, 6, 7, 8 games, and let's go play ball next year. And let's really set the bar a little bit higher next year. I think they're not really too worried about wins and losses from the standpoint of, hey, this is the number we need to get to. Like, there's no set number. We're going to just stack as many bricks in the left-hand column as we can, which is the way you're supposed to go about business. But this feeds into the final thing that he talked about. You can't put winning, this is his quote, you can't put winning before the championship standard. That's some powerful shit. You can't put winning before the championship standard. He's like, you take care of the championship standard. You play the right way. Play fast. Play physical with great execution. And he's like, the winning will take care of itself. But we got to establish that identity first. And we can't try to skip steps and go straight to winning without the things that are going to allow us to win consistently. That was the problem we had here in Washington for too long, especially under Rivera with the last regime, right? There was no identity. They didn't care how they won. There was no specific way we were looking to win. Just try to win. And that's cool. That's the message you want to deliver to your team is you don't get style points here for how you win games. You either put it in the left-hand column or you put it in the right-hand column, right? But there needs to be some sort of identity established, some sort of way you go about winning. The Boston Celtics just won an NBA championship by attempting over 43s a game. That was their identity. We're going to play defense. They had 2, all defensive, all pro, all defensive guys on their perimeter. Should have had a third in Jaylen Brown, but they had Derek White and they had Drew Holiday on that perimeter. Then you had Jaylen Brown, who's really good defensively. Tatum, who's not a slouch. And when he was healthy, they had the unicorn, Kristaps Porzingis, behind them on the back line, right? So defensively, we can get after you. We can spread you out offensively, put 5 guys on the court at all times who can shoot. And we're going to shoot the basketball and make you outscore us. And teams just couldn't do it, right? They established an identity. This is who we're going to be. We're going to shoot the basketball. We're going to play defense. And we're going to challenge you to do it at a higher clip than we do it. And in the NBA, nobody could. Hence, they lifted and hoisted the Larry O'Brien trophy. You got to establish who you are. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? So, if you even look at the Chiefs and what they did last year. They made a shift, a conscious shift. Mahomes said, I had to learn how to allow the defense to win us the game. I wasn't used to that. By the time they got to the playoffs, he realized what their role was.
took a back seat, allowed the defense to beat Miami, allowed the defense, made timely plays against Buffalo, but the defense got it done. Definitely was a defensive struggle against Baltimore, got it done. And then we saw what happened. If not for the defense, they definitely lose the Super Bowl. So they established an identity. Our defense is going to be our calling card. Don't turn it over. Make timely plays, and we'll get it done. Right? That was their identity. You can't put winning before establishing what the championship standard is, what your identity is, how you're going to go about achieving winning week in and week out. The game plan may change because you're playing different opponents, and it'll take something different this week to beat the opponent than it will the following week when you play a different opponent. But your mentality and how you go about achieving that, playing fast, playing physical, executing at a high level, that shouldn't change. So I get it. I get it. So that was day one of training camp in a nutshell. We heard from those three. I anticipate us hearing from another 2 or 3 players tomorrow, hearing from head coach Dan Quinn again. And at some point, we'll hear from one of the coordinators. I guess maybe 4 or 5 days in to camp. They'll switch it up and throw a different coach at us. And we'll probably hear from a number of coaches throughout camp. But looking forward to seeing how things go. Can Jayden Daniels continue to build on what was a positive day number 1? And can they continue to build that rapport with the receiver? Can he continue to rebuild that rapport with the receivers? And can they continue to establish, the continuity that they need in a new offense headed up by Cliff Kingsbury? Same on the defensive side, right? But you really can't get too excited about the defense until the pads come on. That's when you're going to start to really see what this defense is made of, right? Anyway, I digress. Feels good, feels good. We're back like cook crack. Y'all know what it is. Training camp, confidential. We're at the Washington Commanders. Day 1 of camp in the books. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be back tomorrow. Training camp confidential, day number 2. If you are a fan of the Louie T Network podcast, I'll be live tonight. Lots to talk about. Everybody's in camp today. All 32 teams are officially in camp. We're back. Let's get it. So, got some news in the division. CeeDee Lamb holding out. And he's not alone. There are a number of guys looking for contracts that aren't going to participate until they get what they feel like they deserve. So we'll be talking about a lot of those different things. Episode 3 or 4. I think we're on 4 now, right? Yeah. Episode 4 of the Giants offseason Hard Knock series. We'll discuss that. And I've got my my list, my power rankings of the entire league, all 32 teams. We'll put them in order tonight as well. So we'll have a great show lined up for you tonight. So looking forward to it. Until then, you guys take care. God bless. Have a great rest of the day. We're back in business.